Bum 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 bum. You don't need to hear the song any further, do you? You've been listening to it for the last 10 minutes. Hello, my friends. Hello. Joette Calabrese here. Every Monday night, whether we need to or not, we do one thing and one thing only, and that is we learn homeopathy. I teach what I know, and I hope that you can apply it. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a homeopath, Joette Calabrese, and I teach in my classes, my online classes. I teach on my blog. I teach here on Facebook, now YouTube and Twitter, and we're doing a trial on Instagram, and of course, my Mighties. And I have to say, we now have over 4,000 Mighties. How wonderful is that, my friends? It's very exciting to me. So for those of you who do know me, welcome, my dear friends. Hello from Western Australia, that's Tara. And someone from Ontario, I see, from Pittsburgh and Wisconsin. Deb from upstate New York. Wisconsin is Kathy. Hi, everyone. Alberta. Martha's from Alberta, little Canadian flag there. Hi, everyone. It's hot here in Wisconsin. It's kind of warm here, too. It's great to see you. Hello from Wichita. Wonderful to see you all. Hello from Grass Valley, California, says Danielle. So much fun to see everyone. So let's get started, shall we? This is a good topic. This is a topic that most people are unaware of. Unfortunately, some people have to put up with burning in the sun. And I'm going to tell you, oh yeah, hot and stormy. You got that right, Elvira, in Florida. Oh my gosh, it's hot in Florida. Now I lucked out. I have olive skin. I very, very rarely burn, and it's only if I really push it after not having been in the sun for some time and then I'm out for many hours or something like that. But I grew up in a neighborhood where my friends were all Irish, and they all had light skin. Beautiful skin, I might add. I don't think the goal is to be tan if that's not your milky complexion. I love a milky complexion. I love a freckled complexion. I think it's gorgeous. I love all of those different variations on skin. I like dark skin. I like Indian skin. I like black American skin. I love it all. I think it's just gorgeous. So, but what we do want to be sure of is that we don't do damage. So it's a good thing to be in the sun. We don't want to do damage. Now, as I said, I grew up in a neighborhood where my friends were Irish, and so they wore a hat, they wore gauzy clothes when it was hot, they covered themselves up, they stood in the shade, and I realized that it was limiting to a certain degree, but we lived in Buffalo where there wasn't very much, the hot weather didn't last very long, the sun was not as strong, and so they worked around it. Just like each of us works around whatever it is. I'm only 5 feet tall. I have to work around a lot of stuff because I'm 5 feet tall. I often have kitchen cabinets, unless I'm doing my kitchen myself, countertops that are too high for me, and I don't like it. Car seats are often uncomfortable for me, so we have to adjust. Now, so many people think that adjusting means that they just use sunscreen, and I am so against sunscreen. I think it is anything that we put on our body, if you're not willing to squirt it in your mouth, it's not worthy of putting on your skin. Because the moment you put it on your skin, it absorbs. And here's how I know that. We all know that, obviously. But this is when it came to light for me. Years ago, my little son, he was little at the time, he was my only son, had a fever. And I didn't know enough about homeopathy at the time. But I did know about botanicals and garlic, etc. So I made a garlic mash, mashed up the garlic that was from my garden, mixed it with olive oil, made it so that, and I put it on the bottoms of his feet. And I said, okay, now lay still. I'm putting this old towel under your feet. Lay still. I'll come right back and put socks on your feet. Don't move. I ran into the bathroom, washed my hands. And when I came back, I put the socks on him, covered him up, and I went to kiss him, and his breath smelled of garlic. That was not even 5 minutes. Bam! It was absorbed from the bottoms of his feet into his entire system, and I could smell it on his breath. Now, he had not had garlic at dinner time. There was no garlic. We had not had garlic for a couple of days, so it was the only source. So I want you to know, my friends, that whatever you put on your skin, it had better be worthy of your liver, your pancreas, all of your epithelial cells. Epithelial cells are on the skin as well as the inside, the gastrointestinal tract, and epithelial cells in the lungs. So I urge people to not use sunscreen or suntan anything unless it is food. We could put food on our skin. Coconut oil, butter, oh yes, yogurt, oh yes, olive oil. Yes, those are the kinds of things we can put on our skin. So I would eschew that as much as possible, and instead just be protective. Now, having said all of that, you're waiting for the homeopathic medicine, right? You bet. I'm going to tell you a great story about a young woman who came to me a few years back, lovely young girl, who was very sensitive to the sun. How sensitive? Well, this young woman was so sensitive that if she left her home, her house, to go out to the car, she would get, no, not a little color, no, she would get a burn, and she would pay for it. So she had to cover it with, I know, it's extremely unusual, but it does happen. She had to wear gloves. Even in the summer, she wore a hat, and she made sure that she didn't have any of her skin exposed to the sun. Sad. We don't want anyone to live that way. Instead, what we want is to be able to get out in the sun, absorb the sun at the best time for them, with just the right amount of time, with just the right amount of exposure, so that they can absorb and utilize and absorb the vitamin D that comes naturally with the sun. Plus, what it does for the psyche is so important. So, we are going to go to the repertory. We're going to go to Robin Murphy's repertory. And I did not use this repertory when I told this young woman, when I taught her how to use this homeopathic medicine. But I want to show you how I would have. The reason I didn't is because I already knew the medicine. So here it is. As you know, the Meta Repertory, 4th edition. 3rd edition is good too if that's all you've got, by Robin Murphy. Okay. Naked at Noon says Kay, you got it right. Yes, yes. How would such a person get vitamin D? You're absolutely right. They would have to get it through their food. That's how they would get it if they were not in the sun. But we fixed it because this young woman was much, much improved. Now, I've not spoken to her in some time, but the last time I spoke to her, that condition was resolved enough that we didn't, as I recall, did not need to use this medicine again. Now I'm going to show you. I have this marked with my yellow ribbon to indicate the sun. And I'm going in the clinical section. Should you have this book, it's page 2430. And we're going to look at ailments from the sun right here. All of these medicines are ailments from the sun. All down here. And then they're broken down a little bit further. These are not sentences, should you not be aware of what a repertory is if you're not familiar with it. They're simply a list of homeopathic medicines in order of their importance, generally speaking. So, the most important is we read sun, comma, ailments from exposure to. Now, for someone like that young woman, or anyone who has a chronic condition, in other words, they can never go out in the sun, or they can only go out for a short period of time, and they always pay for it, I would call that a chronic condition. Chronic, and so we look under ailments from the sun, exposure to, and then we go a little bit further down, it says chronic. There are only 3 medicines there. Natrum carbonicum, Natrum muriaticum, and Sol. Brianna, you're absolutely right. She knew it. She knows the medicine. She's absolutely right. There are only 3. 2 of them are bold, Natrum muriaticum and Sol. Now, before I learned about Sol, which I actually learned about decades ago, but at the infancy of my understanding of homeopathy, I would use Nat Mur. I did know that Nat Mur was the medicine that could be used for people who are chronically sensitive to exposure or have ailments as a result of being exposed to the sun on a chronic level. Chronic doesn't mean it happens every day. Chronic means that it's not just an occasional suntan or sunburn. You know, somebody overdoes it. There's no bimini on the boat, or they sit out in the sun too long and it happens maybe once a year. No. This is for someone who every time they go in the sun, not as severe as my young client from years ago, but rather maybe sensitive to the sun, not as sensitive. We're going to consider one of these three medicines. Now, third edition, thank you, Tara, says only nat carb. Isn't that fascinating? Well, I have used nat mur, and I don't remember exactly how it was written. It may not have been written as chronic. So, the medicine that I love so much for this condition, and I'm not going to tell you it works for everyone. We are all a little different. We have to try these things out, see how they work, is Sol, S-O-L, 200C. That's the potency I choose. Now, it is not a medicine. Does anyone know where to get it? I'd love to hear where everyone gets it, where you buy it. It's an important medicine to own if you have someone in your family who has this problem. Could we use this medicine long in advance? Someone's going to Florida in August. Do we start them taking Sol in July? Could be done that way. Thompson's in Helios. Helios is in Great Britain, is in England. Thompson's is in Ontario. And yes, those are two places. I was pretty sure that Helios carried it. Just because a pharmacy, by the way, parenthetically, just because they have, that they're in Great Britain doesn't mean you don't order from them. They're an excellent pharmacy. When I was in Mexico last year, I tried it, no burn, and I have a tan for the first time in my entire life. I bought it from Thompson's. This is just thinking about the sun, and I would burn. I was a sunscreen Nazi, and funny enough, I got melanoma in my early 20s. I tried Sol 200 when I was in Mexico this year. No burn, exclamation point. This is We the Free from Alberta. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Yeah, this is an important medicine. I teach it in my skin course, so I'm hoping you maybe learned it from there, or you learned it by studying your repertoire. What about children who go often to the seaside? Would Sol taken ahead of time be a good idea instead of sun filter, I don't know what that word, anyway. The way that I used this medicine with this young woman, the way I taught her to do it is to use Sol 200, I suggested every other day over a period of 2 months. Because she couldn't, as I said, she couldn't leave the house. She couldn't leave the house without a burn. And then we'd be treating the burn. She'd have to use belladonna or cantharis. I'm not sure I even remember the medicines that were used. They helped, but we don't want to backpedal. We want to step in advance. So that's how I used it with her. Now, it's someone when children are going to go out in sun and play in the sun, and they have ailments from, remember, this is not so that your kids don't get a sunburn or that you don't get a sunburn because you've been out in the sun all day. This is generally because there is a chronic ailment. This is a condition. It's a condition. Now, when people say, well, yeah, of course of course I burn, my family's Irish and my mother has really light skin and my father has blue eyes and blonde hair. And so, of course that happens. So I guess that must mean it's not a condition. Yes, it is a condition. Absolutely. What about children? Okay, that's the same question. Let's see if we've got. Could I use nat mur while waiting for Sol? I think one could use nat mur while waiting for Sol. And I would use it, personally, I would consider using it in a low potency, like a 6X. Then I would use it twice daily. So, we're going to use this when we have a pathology, either a pathology that leads into, in other words, it's shown historically to cause problems for a particular person, or we know that it's going to cause trouble because the person has no choice but to, let's say it's someone who is a lifeguard, and they know they are going to get a sunburn. They do every time. I do know some Aussies in WA that take 1 dose of Sol, 50 m just once at the start of the summer. Very interesting, Catherine. That's interesting. Would I use that? I mean, I suppose it's certainly worth a try. I start with a 200. 200 potency is some people think it's a high potency. I don't agree. I think it's a medium potency. Low potencies are 3s, 6s, 12s, 30s. 9 is in there too. A lot of the French use 9 potencies, 9C. 200 is medium. I think that's right in the middle. And then a 1M, 10M, 50M are high. What about if a chronic burn from years ago, skin on nose still damaged over 10 years later and avoids sun? Some have said rash is lupus. Others have said it's not. No one is sure. It might be worth a try. It might be worth a try. Skin damage, yeah, might be worth a try. Would not use it for a long period of time. But I want you to know the 4th edition of Robin Murphy does not have that many pages. Are you sure you're in the repertory? We're on page 2430, not the Materia Medica, Cynthia. We're in the repertory. I think you are, let's see, is it the same 24? Yeah, that's right. You're in the Materia Medica. Repertory is a whole different study. Okay, good idea to have the Materia Medica, but this is the repertory. All righty. Yes, I got sun poisoning at the slightest exposure. What about some categories of ailments? I'm not sure I know what you mean by that. My nose gets burned so easily. Is that how it's spelled? Sol, S-O-L, that's right. So do you still have to limit sun exposure, I imagine? Listen, let's put it this way. If you have a food, let's say you have a dairy intolerance, okay? And you get sick every time you have dairy. People say to me, so does that, when I'm using the homeopathic medicine, let's say it's Athusa, which is one of our main medicines for dairy intolerance, while I'm taking Athusa 200, must I stay away from dairy? And my answer is, well, it depends on how much you suffer and how far you want to go with this. If you suffer to the point where every time you have dairy, you get bloating that's so severe that you can barely move, you can't sleep that night, you have burping and gas, and the next day you have tremendous diarrhea, I would still stay away from the dairy while the homeopathic medicine is helping to uproot. But if you have a sensitivity to dairy and it's more like, oh, you get a little indigestion and you really need to get rid of this because you'd like to be able to start drinking some raw milk, for example, which is the only milk that is truly good milk, in my estimation, my friends. Raw milk is medicine, pasteurized, adulterated, homogenized milk is garbage. So we want to stay with either raw or nothing. So let's say you want to start drinking raw milk. Now you decide. How severe is it? You determine. If you can live with a little bit of indigestion or a little bloating by drinking that raw milk while you're still taking while you're using Athusa and waiting for Athusa to act, that's your answer. Would the Soul Remedy work on a toddler and be a lifetime remedy? Will sun sensitivity reappear? It's hard to say. It's the same thing. I'll use the same thing with the dairy intolerance. Many people, it takes years to get past a very severe dairy intolerance, a couple years, but each couple of months they improve and improve and improve slowly. How do we know there's improvement? There's less intensity to the symptoms, whatever those symptoms are that we're associating with that dairy intolerance, lasting for a shorter period of time. It used to be all day that they suffered. Now they only suffer 3 hours while taking the medicine, and a larger space between each episode. It used to be every day. Now it's every 4 days. That's how we determine. This is something, if you are serious about learning how to do this, my friends, I urge you to go to my online courses. We have a skin course, Skin the Ugly Truth. You just go to Joette's I never remember the name of that page, Joette's Learning Center. And you scroll down and look at the courses. I urge you strongly, because it's not just, this is the condition, here's the medicine. Here's the condition, here's the medicine. No, it teaches you how to read what you have done. That's what I just said to you. That's a big part of it. Those 3 magic markers, so that you know that you're moving in the right direction. So, eventually, after using Athusa, for example, to reduce the dairy intolerance over a period of time, now the person can introduce that raw milk and have no trouble at all. And now they back off of the medicine because they have no need for it any longer. Then they carry on and they drink their raw milk, no problem, no problem, no problem. Now they get into a traffic accident. Or, worse yet, perhaps, they get some kind of a urinary tract infection or something like that, and they are unwisely administered antibiotics. Bam! Right back to that dairy intolerance. Start all over again. I'm laughing because that is so common. It's not starting from day one, but we do have to backpedal because antibiotics destroy what? The gut. So it's the same thing with any of these medicines when I'm using that as a different example so you can see how we compare them. There is a beautiful testimony of Athusa. My son also has a testimony. My son would get he was raised on raw milk. He never had an antibiotic, but he came from me and my husband who had antibiotics in the past. And so he was fine with raw milk for the longest time. Then suddenly, around teenage years, he was no longer able to tolerate. We had to use the medicines, and now he's able to tolerate once again. Okay, by ailments, I think she means headache, nausea, exhaustion, dizziness, etc. Ailments, yes, conditions. Okay, homeopathy works on everyone, and I would think it would need to be repeated before every time you're in the sun for long periods of time. Yes, Ross, I agree with that. That's exactly where we would go with this. It would need to be repeated for a while until you can see that the condition is no longer as extreme, less intense, lasting for a shorter period of time, and a larger space between each episode. How do we determine that? Well, we're going to look at how the person reacts in the sun. And as they take it, each time before they go out in the sun, maybe the night before, the morning of, and then and see how it goes. Or if it is a chronic, serious condition like the young woman that I was describing earlier, we used it even when she wasn't going to be in the sun. We just kept using it until things shifted. Yes. Now, that chronic burn, let me just say over 10 years later, chronic burn from years ago, the skin, I would say, sole is not my first choice. I would look at ailments from burns or burn, of course, in the repertory under burns. And then we look at remedies like belladonna or cantharis or antimonium crude, etc. My husband had luck with Athusa at first go, and his reactions are usually awful. By ailments, I think she means, okay, here we go. That's a beautiful testimony. That's what I'm wondering, Vicki, since Joette is prime. Okay. Could you use sole for sunstroke? It's possible, but we have remedies that are not better, are even more specific to sunstroke. And so again, you're going to look in the repertory, but I believe I just wrote about that on my blog. Maybe not yesterday's blog, but a couple weeks ago I wrote about sunstroke. So sometimes it's hard to know. Is it heat stroke or is it sunstroke? Okay. Gloninum. It's actually glonoinum. Glonoinum or gloninum is the remedy that we use for sunstroke, overheated in the sun. I believe it's glonoinum. I think it might be spelled wrong here, but aconitum is another one. Yep, is another good one for sunstroke and heat stroke, etc. We're going to, I have to know. I'm looking in my Materia Medica, which is what was just brought up. It's glonoinum. Yes, it's Glonoin. So it's glonoin. Yep. All right. Let's see if we have any other questions, my friends. Now, there are other rubrics in this section under clinical sun ailments from exposure to. If we also have How about if we have dermatitis from the sun? Dermatitis from the sun, that's on page 2431. That's only 2 remedies, nat mur and sol. And sol is bold, so it's a little bit more powerful, a consideration. That doesn't mean that we don't kick nat mur out of the club. Yep, let's just see what else everyone's got here. Very good questions. Love your questions tonight. Yeah, we're talking about other parts of the world that get very hot. Never knew there were remedies from sunburn. My sunburns readily, quickly, and retreated the burns with homeopathy, but I thought I just needed to use sunscreen to avoid severe burns. Hated it every time. I don't blame you, Ross. I don't blame you. Yep. There are 3 different sol on Helonius, on the Helonius site. Oh, I see. Britannic, Australis, and Africana. Which one? Well, if you happen to live in Australia, I'd buy that one. If you happen to live in other southern climes, such as Africa, I would purchase that one, but I would get the Britannic. That's the one that I would purchase. If you live in North America or Great Britain, that's certainly where I would start with this. Let's just see. I'm going to take a look at it in my Materia Medica here. Yep. All right, how are our questions coming along, my friends? Hi, Monica. The one that sol is page 1798 in Robin Murphy's Materia Medica. And he's not making a distinction, but pharmacies often do because they have homeopaths and students from around the world. How does someone who has a job in the sun all the time do to protect from skin cancer? I don't believe, I'm sorry, I'm going to really aggravate people. I don't believe skin cancer is from the sun. I believe skin cancer is from damage as a result of too much sun. And I believe that if we keep the terrain tidy, that those kinds of conditions don't generally present. And so the way that I see it is that if we stay away from bad oils, seed oils, canola, mazola, Motorola, and we use butter, and we eat good quality food, and we don't ever read ingredients on our food. Don't read ingredients, my friends. And I think you know what I mean by that. If you're reading ingredients on the food that you buy, that means you're buying something someone else has made. If it's broccoli, you don't need to read ingredients. If it's a chuck roast, you don't need to read ingredients because there are no ingredients. Now, having said that, in the world in which we live today, I just found the butter that I had been buying a while ago. Suddenly on the package it said cream, some of them with salt. I usually buy mine unsalted, but cream, milk, and flavors. So do be careful because they're sneaking all kinds of things into foods lately. So I believe that if someone is being intelligent about not burning, wearing protective clothing, and eating high quality food, getting a good 8 hours of sleep, getting good exercise, and if they're outside, they're likely getting good exercise, staying away from synthetics and chemicals, that's how we stay away from cancer. Okay, let's see what else will pleasantly blow your mind. Eating butter helps to protect your skin too. Yes, it does. Why is that? You know, when you were little and you had your mom would give, you had a little injury on your skin or even diaper rash, they'd use A, D, and E ointment. Vitamin A, D, and E. Well, I don't buy vitamins, but I eat foods with A, D, and E. What's the food that has a lot of A, D, and E that's great for the skin? Mwah. Butter. Okay, my friends, we are now half past the hour, and I'm going to dash off. Would Sol 1M be a good idea for someone who burns chronically from sun exposure? As I said earlier, when I worked with that young woman, 200 potency was perfect. I didn't go to 1M. Including bioengineered ingredients. You bet. Okay, my friends, God bless you all. See you next week. Look forward to seeing you then. Bye.